Live? Yes, we are live. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Break the Rules live stream. I am your host, Lev Polyakov, and we are coming at you today to talk about the esoteric connections between Elon Musk, whether he is a Satanist, and what exactly does that even mean. And welcome all the people in the live Twitter space as well. Be sure to smash that like button, smash that subscribe button, and click that bell to help this channel grow, where we bring all kinds of different people together who would have otherwise never talked to each other. And today's no exception. Drew is back for the second time around this week. Drutang, the esoteric Drutang, always a pleasure to have you on board, brother. And we have Gnostic Informant, Neil, who is one of the most prolific, smartest people I know when it comes, I always have to add that when it comes to a lot of the mystery school traditions, esoteric, religion, all of these things that people have kind of taken for granted all these years, not really uncovered, like, what is the origin of all of these religions that we practice, and what are some of the more esoteric elements of those. And we are going to see today exactly like Luciferianism, Satanism, in relation to the rocketry, outer space, in relation to Musk, what exactly is going on here, and is it exactly as bad as some people want to portray it? Maybe it's not so bad. So anyway, we are going to get started with Drew and his American apocalypse, which I think ties into all this. So Drew, go ahead, brother. Let us know what's going on and the whole Elon Musk connection to Satanism thing. Oh, I am not hearing you right now for some reason. I don't know what's going on. Make sure that your audio is on. And while I am doing that, Neil, do you have anything to say before Drew comes online? Because I was hearing his audio before. Yeah.
Well, I guess while he's fixing that, I'll just say like the I think the way we view what Satanism or Luciferianism is very much through the lens of Christianity and what they think of it as. And so this idea of who is Lucifer develops over time as this opposing character to the Christian faith. So, for example, Lucifer literally. Oh, you got your mic on?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, there you go. Did it
Okay.
turn on?
Excellent.
I always forgot about this
I'll
little
just
red button they got on the side here.
No, but go for it, Neil. Yeah.
And then, so Lucifer used to be, in the ancient mythology context, Roman mythology, the light bringer. Lucifer was not evil. Lucifer was not like a satanic character trying to do anything like, evil to anybody. But then that word becomes synonymous with Satan later on.
All right, Drew, you got it from here.
So yeah, what I would I don't think I would frame really what I think about Elon Musk as like I don't think calling him a Satanist is the best way to frame exactly what I think about him, for exactly the reasons that we were just talking about there. What I would say, so the way, well, I guess, in some ways, yes, that certain aspects of the Satanism idea do apply, but the way that we talk about it, as far as like Lucifer just means light bringer, except
Oh no, it's the internet outside that's causing this. So Neil, while Drew is doing his thing, fixing that, do your thing right now. Keep going about Luciferianism. Pick up where Drew left off.
So I did a video about this recently. It's a 45-minute video where I just go through the evolution of Satan and Lucifer. The video is called "How Satan Became Lucifer," because that's what happened. It's not the other way around. Lucifer didn't become Satan. Satan becomes Lucifer, because we already had a Lucifer and we already had a Satan, and they were completely separate characters. One of them is from the Old Testament text called Job. He's in a couple other texts as well. He's in Genesis. He's in some of the other books. But in these texts, he's just basically some district attorney type of character. And what I mean by that is El is the judge. He's ruling on the throne, and he has all the 70 divine sons of God ruling under him. And Satan is basically one of those guys, and he just basically, his job is to accuse people. That's what that word means, Satan, accuser. His job is to accuse people. So he finds Job. The oldest text in the Bible, by the way, is Job, not Genesis. A lot of people don't realize that. But when we date these texts, there's internal evidence that shows us when these texts were written. Is it Hellenistic period? Is it Persian period? What is it? Job is very old. Job doesn't mention Israel. Job is extremely ancient. But Job in this case, and so the first time we ever hear about Satan is in this book called Job. And in this text, he's friends with God. He's like, hey, God, you know your boy Job down there. He ain't shit, bro. He ain't what you think he is. And God's like, what do you mean? He worships me every single day. And Satan's like, bro, take his money away and watch what he does then. Bet, bro. So they do it. And they kill his whole family, and they take his farm away, they take his money away, and Job still praises God. That's the point of the text, is that, Job's righteousness, and, sometimes evil can happen to you. God can be testing you. There's a lot of different factors in what this text actually means. But long story short, in regards to Satan, Satan's not evil in this text. He's not doing anything. He's working with God. They're working things out in his creation. So the idea, and that, by the way, this event supposedly happens after the fall of Adam and Eve, as the serpent falls out of the garden. So the idea of the serpent being Satan, that wasn't a thing until late. The Christians do that in Revelation. So that's why I'm going to lay that out, some little context. But I will also, and this is the last thing I want to say, so I can set up this, so we can have this conversation the right way. I have no problem conceding that Lucifer, in the context of today, is something different than it was in Roman mythology. I'm not sitting here trying to say that we need to bring back the old context of Lucifer, because things do change, and especially in mythology and theology, things change. And then, so Luciferianism and Satanism is something different than it was in the context of Roman mythology. People have every right to say Lucifer is the opposition to Christianity, because that's what it's become. That's a reality. So I'm not like trying to bring anybody to like redefine Lucifer or anything, but I do like to bring in, so people understand the evolution of Lucifer and how he became who he became. That's all.
Very interesting, Neil, as always. And Drew, I think your internet should be back now. Yeah, let us know about Elon Musk with the Egyptian crook and flail image that you posted recently. What exact connection are you trying to make, as far as who do you think Elon Musk sees himself as? And also, don't forget to go back into the Twitter space, and I'm going to host you as well. But yeah, Drew, let us know what you think with Elon Musk.
So yeah, I think that bringing up the Pharaoh thing is probably a good way to go about how I think about Elon Musk, as opposed to like me defining him as like a Satanist. It's not something I would necessarily like state. But what I do see him as is being fulfilling the role of, again, another really loaded term is Antichrist. But what I see the role of him playing is very pivotal in this next astrological age that we're going into. In the same way that Jesus Christ defined the age of Pisces, I see Elon Musk and what his legacy will be as being very defining in pretty much in a mirror way, especially in the way that his public persona and personal mythology is building up. I think he's going to play a very similar role, and especially given the the age of Pisces. The Pisces is the fish symbol, so it's what all the Christians use. You'll have the fish symbol as on like their bumper stickers and whatnot. So Jesus, he has his apostles were fishermen, and then he told them to become fisher of men. But in the same way, a same connection, or at least very similar, would be Elon Musk, or the age of Aquarius. Aquarius is it's known as the water bearer, but it's also referred to as the knowledge bearer. So, yeah.
You know who W.B. Yeats is?
I'm not familiar. No.
He was a Rosicrucian English writer, or maybe Irish writer, not English writer. He did a lot of Irish folk text, and he wrote a lot of. He was a really interesting, fascinating writer. And people who study English literature, he's mandatory in any university. He's like one of the great writers of his time. He was a very spiritual guy, And one of the fascinating things that I remember being taught about him was that he thought there was three messiahs. The first one was Helen of Troy, from the fall of Troy, that she was the messiah because she brings Hellenism in her name, literally Hellenism, Helen of Troy. And then he said the second messiah being Jesus. Obviously, he had his reasons for that. I don't think we need to go into why that is. But he said there's a third messiah coming after the year 2000, unnamed. And I just thought, and when you said that just now with Elon Musk, I mean, I obviously don't think that about Elon Musk. I think he's going downhill very fast with a lot of this Twitter shit, but I could be wrong. I'm just wanted to get your thoughts on that. Maybe what do you think about WB Yates on that?
Again, I'm not familiar with him, but if he's a Rosicrucian, the Rosicrucians are the exact same group essentially that Elon Musk. If you look at the symbol for Scientology, the cross they use, which basically is the 8-pointed star of Inanna or whatever that we were talking about earlier, Venus.
That's Venus, yeah.
So that is the Rose cross. That is the exact same thing. The reason they put the overlay of, so Rosicrucian means Rose Cross, Knights of the Rose Cross. So they're referring to the same thing. They're referring to the same symbol, and what they were talking about was reintegrating the feminist, or rather the divine feminine, into the Trinity, which was taken out during the Piscean age when Roman Catholicism was consolidating. It effectively consolidated a large swath of the religions within the Roman Empire. So you had the Judaism base, and then you bring in a lot of the holidays of the different pagan religions of the lands in the Roman Empire. And then, you have some Sol Invictus mixed in there, which is all astrotheology based. But yeah, I would say the Rosicrucians are exactly what we're doing. And Shakespeare, aka Francis Bacon, which of course, there's a whole debate.
I love that conspiracy theory, and there's something to that, by the way. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they created the whole English language in a very similar way, consolidating a lot of base languages.
That was the same decade as the King James Bible being produced.
Yeah, how about that, huh? What do you
1610s was a crazy time, man. That was a lot of revolutions happening.
Well, you're saying the same date. Could you go as far as to say the same author? As far as Francis Bacon or William Shakespeare?
I would.
Writing the Bible. Okay, Drew is on that.
Because the King James Bible and Shakespeare's works, like the written copies, there's all the same symbolism just scattered throughout the margins. But
have you ever heard this is okay? So someone showed me this back when I was a King James only Christian, and they said that there's a psalm. I forgot which psalm it is. Shakespeare. I'm looking it up. Shakespeare's psalm. Okay, Psalm 46. Supposedly in the King James Bible, and I checked it, and this is true. This is actually true. If you go to Psalm 46, 46 words from the top is the word shake. 46 words from the bottom is the word spear. And then here's the part that I don't know if I can verify this or not. Supposedly Shakespeare was 46 years old in 1611 when the Bible came out. So it's like, that's crazy. I love those type of conspiracy shit, man. I'll eat it up. It's fun to me.
Well, yeah, the guy who they say was Shakespeare was illiterate, and he didn't teach his kids to read or write either. So it's highly unlikely it was him. In the same way, I mean, Shakespeare, he said all the world a stage, and that's exactly what they understood was what Plato talked about, is that the stories that you tell a society controls it. So what you tell the stories and the myths that you tell the children, that's what they grow up looking for, those archetypes. And then if you have your leaders embody those same archetypes, then they will follow them in the way that kings, they claim divine right to rule, in the same way that the pharaohs said that, the old kingdom pharaoh said they were sons of Ra, and then the new kingdom pharaoh said they were Horus on earth, Osiris in death, etc. So that's the exact same thing. Shakespeare, his works, before there was English dictionaries, it was Shakespeare's works were referred to try and figure out what proper spelling and context and grammar were. They would refer to as Shakespeare's works instead of, because there was no dictionary or thesaurus. So they literally, that Francis Bacon, not only did him, and again, when I say Francis Bacon, it's also a cutout, because it's not just Francis Bacon. There's the whole Rosicrucian society behind him that are translating these texts. They're taking these ancient myths and translating them into English so they could build a core culture in order to build an empire off of.
Yeah, King James's other book that he published was a demonology book.
And then there was also John Dee before that with Queen Elizabeth. So these things I think have been around for a very long time. But what I just don't know is, how can we be that sure that what's going on with Musk, for example, is also following in that path? We can be, let's say, much more sure of things like Jack Parsons, who was a disciple of Aleister Crowley, and he was responsible for the advance in rocketry during World War II. He was also working together with the Nazi Werner von Braun on the United States space program. So here we do have somebody who was heavily involved in the occult, who did an incredible contribution to the world. But as far as Elon Musk goes, I know, like Drew, what are some of the things that we have where we can establish this a little bit more solidly?
So yeah, what I was referring to earlier, as far as the stories you tell your civilization, define it. This goes with the idea of predictive programming. So all these stories that you focus on in your civilization are going to become very important. So what you write, affects the mass consciousness. So if you want to look for a direct connection, I know, I feel like Lev's setting me up here because he knows the connection I want to draw. But so like Lev was talking about, you have two critical figures that are both referred to as the father of rocketry and the father of NASA in the United States. So you have the more well-known one, Werner von Braun, ex-Nazi SS.
Well, ex-Nazi is same as saying like ex-Playboy Playmate. There's no such thing as an ex-Playmate, but go on.
Exactly. So he came to the United States in Operation Paperclip. They surrendered to the West when they knew the Russians were about to show up at their doorstep. So he came over and started working the U.S. rocketry program. He had already been a longtime friend of Jack Parsons, who, for those of you who don't know, Marvel Jack Parsons, his first name, which we're going to get into later. The Marvel series is essentially the predictive programming that I'm pointing to as the most defining of the post-Christian American empire, so post-World War II, New World Order. But anyways, Marvel Jack Parsons, he was good friends with Werner von Braun. 2 years after Werner von Braun comes to the United States, he writes a book while he's in the U.S. called The Mars Project. It's about a human colony on Mars. And in that book, he gives the title to the leader of the human Mars colony. He calls the leader, it's not the leader's name, it's the leader's title. So AKA the leader's role, just like an actor would play the role in a Shakespearean play. That's not his name, that's just the role he's playing. But anyways, they referred to him as Elon, the leader of the human Mars colony. And he wrote that in 1948, and then it was translated into English by 1953. But yes, he was very in close contact with Jack Parsons. Jack Parsons, 2 years previous to that, in 1946, did a ritual with Scientology founder L. Ron Hubbard called the Babalon working in the Mojave Desert in California, in which they did a little sex magic ritual based off of the works of Aleister Crowley, which Aleister Crowley himself is basically a spiritual descendant of the works of Francis Bacon and John Dee, English magicians who basically defined the English language. Again, they're building up, a cultural base.
Circle. It's all coming full circle.
Yeah, exactly. So this is basically the Francis Bacon. He was the father of colonialism, essentially. He wrote a book called New Atlantis, and Thomas Jefferson cited him as being a major inspiration in the Constitution and his whole view of what America was supposed to be. So anyways, Parsons and Parsons and von Braun, they're fulfilling that. And anyways, von Braun gives the title Elon to the leader of the Mars colony. The most interesting part is that chapter is called how the Mars is governed, or how Mars is governed. And it basically describes what's called a technocracy, which is a rule by experts, not by democracy. And Elon has tweeted multiple times, I want to create a Martian technocracy. So he is doing exactly, he's doing exactly what the book says he's going to do.
So yeah, I don't know, Gnostic. What do you think, Neil? Is this something that you think is enough evidence to say that it's substantial, or is something missing for you? Like, if we have enough things together, it does start to paint a very interesting picture. But what say you, Neil? I am not hearing you right now, brother. So you gotta.
Are you asking me? I thought you were
Yes,
asking
sir.
me.
Yes, sir. I'm asking you.
I
What
had
do
to
you
step
think?
out for 1 second. Can you ask me one more time?
Sure. Well, what do you think is the? How much do you think this all makes sense to you, to yourself personally? Is this enough evidence that Drew has brought forth as far as all these connections?
I think it's so. This is very complicating. Like, it's not. This is like. It comes down to like how we define these things and how we, like, are they literally Luciferians, or is it an artistic expression? Is it opposition to the church? I think there's a little bit of everything at play, and I do think you're onto something. I just put out a video recently, and it's about the founding fathers, and because for some reason people still think the founding fathers were all a bunch of Christians when they were like Thomas Paine. I'm holding in my hand right now. Just happen to be looking through it right now.
Bring in the pain.
Thomas Paine,
An age of reason, yeah. The
greatest,
people who built the Georgia Guidestones were seeking a new age of reason, yeah.
And these were the biggest critics of Christianity ever since the time of Celsus in the 2nd century when paganism was still ruling. There's never been, and they cite Celsus, but this is what I was doing some research on the founding fathers, and I found that they were extremely critical of Christianity. They also were very loving of the old Athenian democracy, Roman Republican ways. So they were trying to balance those two out. How can we balance out the Republican of the Romes and the Democrats of Athens and make a constitution based off like Solon the lawgiver and Demosthenes in Athens? And this is what blew my mind, is that the Star Spangled Banner was originally a different song. The lyrics got changed in 1810 by Freedom's, what's his name?
Francis Scott Key.
Francis Scott Key. That was an older song by the Anacreontic Society. The Anacreontic Society was a group of Luciferian founding fathers in England, France, and in America. They had the secret society of, they were basically Bacchic revelers. They had this idea of mixing the twine, or the myrtle of Venus and the vine of Bacchus, and this was like this Luciferian god that they put up as their what they're following. Basically, this is their enlightenment, right? Light giver. And so the lyrics of this song, which became the Star Spangled Banner, it's odes to Bacchus and Venus, who's Lucifer. And people don't even know that. They're all these Christian right-wing people going to their football games with their hand on their chest, singing the Star Spangled Banner. They have no idea that song used to be a Luciferian ode to Bacchus. How many people know that?
Drew, did you know that?
No, I didn't know that specifically. That is a great fun fact. It really ties everything together, because that's, that subconscious, getting people to subconsciously support something, even when they think it's the complete opposite. You still avoid the karmic consequences, and you still get their consent. What I was going to add to that is you're 100% right about, the founding fathers, and what I wanted to, what a lot of my book is about, and to go back to my earlier point about the similarities between what I see the role Musk playing and Jesus Christ of the Roman era, was, America is the new Rome. If you look at our capital, we have the Washington Monument obelisk right in front of our Capitol building dome, just like in the Vatican.
And that goddess Libertas that's on top of the Capitol is exactly what Dea Roma looks like. The goddess, some call her Minerva. She's Athena to the Athenians, but that's the same look, the same exact head, helmet and shield and sword. It's Athena. It's the same thing.
Yeah, that bringing back that mother goddess, divine feminine, is basically that's what the Babalon working ritual that that Hubbard and Parsons did.
Parsons,
Well,
yeah.
based off of Crowley's work, the Moonchild, it was to summon Babylon first, the whore of Babylon, rather, to birth the Moonchild. So it's you by bringing back the knowledge of the divine feminine aspect that's missing from the like theology and Trinity, that creates the New Age of Horus, the Moonchild, which I see as being Musk, given that Parsons and Homeboy were friends. Von Braun, and then he wrote the book 2 years after they did the ritual in the desert, which they definitely told him about. And the Nazi SS, of course, they built a whole castle to do rituals in. They had a whole ritual chamber, which you can still go see today. But yeah, Washington D.C., the Rome or the land that Washington D.C. was built on used to be called Rome. It was originally the land was called Rome.
That's fascinating.
So, Neil, does the Moonchild ritual check out as far as all the research that you've done? And does it make sense to you personally that somebody like Musk would be this inheritor, so to speak?
So, yes, it does. But the reason why it's a yes is not necessarily because these people, and this is my opinion, you can push back as much as you want, but it's not necessarily that they believe in the Christian God but want to oppose it and worship the Satan God, and then like purposely like they actually don't believe in this religion, and I think it's more of an expression of opposition. So I think what you're getting is these rituals, these rituals that we would call satanic, which is a perfect way to describe it. You know, you got the pentagram and you got you slaughter the goat and you sprinkle the altar or the blood on the altar 4 times. That's all. That's not only is that in pagan, ancient Roman, Etruscan, or ancient Greek pagan rites. It's also in. I mean, you can find that in Deuteronomy when it talks about the sin offering, slaughter the goat, and all that. That's the Bronze Age magic rituals that became satanic because Christianity came along, and Christianity came during a time where Stoicism, Middle Platonism, Epicureanism was on the rise. So people were moving away from superstition and going into more rational ways of practicing religion. And so those ancient ways are considered satanic, but really that's just the old rituals of what we would call pagans. They don't call themselves pagans. They're just devotees of Bacchus or devotees of whatever god that they're happening to give an offering to. So, polytheistic rituals that are being done by people like in this modern times, in the Enlightenment era, the people that you mentioned, what I think is happening is they're harnessing the power of religion, because these rituals do give, there is some power, there's energy that, like, doing this stuff does something to people. There's something happening. You can call it Bacchic revelry, you can call it the Holy Spirit, whatever you want to call it, but there's something happening. People do feel something from this. And I think these people, after the Age of Reason, after the Enlightenment, after this new world, I guess you can call it a new world order, because it is kind of a new world order in the sense of this common laws back. Libertarian, liberal ideals are now becoming normalized. So it is a new world order in that sense. But what they're doing is, I think that they're expressing their spirituality in opposition to the old ways of Christian faith.
Yeah, no, I agree. And to your point, they don't see it as like a direct opposition. Like you said, they're just interpreting. They're interpreting Christianity in its roots, in a way, in its astrotheology roots and its pagan influences. They know where it came from, so they're interpreting it in the original context in some ways. What I wanted to say specifically about that was why I think it's appropriate to refer to Musk as the Antichrist, etc. not that I'm exactly saying he is, but using those type of Book of Revelation terms like beast and Antichrist is because Crowley, Aleister Crowley, literally called himself the beast. He changed his name to Aleister Crowley so that in gematria, I believe in both Hebrew and English gematria, it equals 666. And Parsons himself called himself the Antichrist over and over again.
What
Uh,
you want to know something else real quick? Just I'm sorry to cut you off, but this is so crazy. The liberals in France under Napoleon made a banner, and on the banner you have Nero and Caligula stomping out a pope. Nero is the beast 666, so that's a satanic symbol right off the bat. So I just want to let you know that this symbolism is powerful in this time period. I just wanted to play.
And it repeats. It's secular.
Yeah, and so Crowley's doing this space. Crowley's looking at that and doing the same type of stuff.
A quick question for both of you guys, by the way. Would the repetition of that symbol 666 mean that for all the people, like a lot of the atheists who talk about, well, Book of Revelation only talks about, what happened during the Roman Empire with Nero and so forth. Would that be the answer to them? To say, like, yes, they based it off of that, but it also can continue onwards and upwards. Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah, 100%. It's all the reason you can predict things. The reason astrology works is because there is a cycle. Time is the way humanity has always recorded time. The only way we've recorded time is by tracking the movements of the celestial bodies. So astrology and the whole concept of being able to predict things in the future is because there's a cycle, and that's the only reason you can predict things. And the people writing Revelation, and the reason why out of all the books, it was the last book written that was included in the Council of Nicaea, wasn't an accident. And the people that have been in power for these last 2,000 years, guiding us through the age of Pisces, they know very well that, and literally in Book of Revelation, it specifically says, if you change any of the words of this book, you'll be cursed. So they're very, very specific about the words they used, and very intentional about the words that are written there.
Eratosthenes, a writer from the ancient Greece, he put together an astrology book, and the point of the book is it's like a scientific treatise, basically, where there's certain things that happen in the sky during certain times of the year, and those occurrences are followed by some sort of like, I'll give you an example. He talks about the rising of the dog star. When you see the rising of the dog star happening at a certain time, then there's probably going to be floods and raining. Springtime is on the rise. The Egyptians knew this for thousands of years. And so there was also ways to predict lunar eclipses. And then he would say like, there's certain things you look at and you could predict the lunar eclipse is going to happen. And once you have this laid out, you can use that to your advantage. You can go to the people and say, if the lunar eclipse happens, that means that we must do this or X, or the God tells us to do this. So it becomes a political weapon, astrology, in that sense. So yeah, and you can predict things. There are cycles that happen on a yearly revolutionary cycle, on a monthly cycle as well. So they use that as a weapon.
But to be clear, though, when you're saying using it as a weapon, it's almost like saying that the only application of astrology is to trick people with things that can be scientifically understood. But what if we're talking about things that, well, you could also say they may be scientifically understood, but we're not there yet. Things having to do with people's psychology, things having to do with certain people coming up in the world and changing the world into a certain direction. What would you say about that, Neil?
So they actually found what's called the Antikythera mechanism. It's the oldest analog computer ever found. Dates to 3rd century, 2nd century BCE. Found it in the middle of in the sea, in the Aegean Sea, off one of the islands in Greece. And this device, when they recreated it, they realized that it can, if used properly, can predict celestial events, planetary movements, lunar solar eclipses, stuff like that. So this was a device people are using this is technology and science. Technology and science, astrology, alchemy. This is all one thing back then. They didn't separate these things out yet. So this was all kind of just the same thing. So yeah, people did use it as a weapon. There also were people that used it in their rituals and religion as well. So you have it. I guess it goes both ways.
I wouldn't say that answers my question, and I want to make sure I go to Drew as well.
Okay.
But to be specific about what I'm saying is whether you believe, based on your research, that there is a potential for something like astrology not only to predict, the movements of the planets and when there's going to be an eclipse in order to trick people with that, but something that can predict how the people themselves are going to act at a certain point and whether we're going to see certain changes in the world as far as certain wars, certain events coming about. So that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about.
As far as that goes, that's that. If you look at all the ancient sources, going back to Cicero, going back to Lucretius or the Epicureans, Democritus, even Plato himself. This is one of the most criticized things of all time. This is one of the people will even your devout followers were writing stuff like, yeah, these things aren't necessarily as accurate as the priests want to make it out to be. So, it's very vague. The way people act during certain stars. This is what I'm not. Okay, maybe I'm wrong. I'm a skeptic. I'm a rationalist. I'm a humanist as well. But to me, it seems as though those things have been always very vague, and they're not really they're not proven to be exactly predictable of people's behaviors. Whereas you can predict events in the sky literally because we can map out the stars. So those are two different things. If that makes sense.
All right, let's see, Drew, do you disagree?
No, I don't think well, yeah, I guess I disagree. I think things are a bit more predictable. Like there is definitely a connection. I would point to, the Hermetic principle of as above, so below. Like I said, like all of our whole history is stored in the sky. Like everything we know is history. The only reason we even have something to point to that shows that time passed is the movement of the celestial objects in the sky. But I mean, whether or not direct, if you can directly predict things, I think you can predict certain themes, and very not specific things. At least I don't know. I don't think you can. But yeah, I mean it's a bit. It gets as much power from the fact that the believers in it than it gets from
Sure.
its own. Right.
And if I was to say if I was to steal man for a second, the one thing that I've heard, the argument that I've heard that made the most sense is the argument that the moon has power to control tides and stuff, and our bodies are made up of mostly water. So logically following that is, can the moon affect our body structure, our chemistry? Maybe that's true.
Yeah, it rules the whole feminine cycle, and yeah.
Obviously I would say, hey, that's an interesting point, and I wouldn't really, I don't know what to say to oppose that. I think that's maybe I'm not sure what the science is at, but it's interesting to hear that.
But you're trying to grab onto something physical, and I can understand why, because otherwise we're just kind of in the air and making assumptions. But I don't know, Drew, is there any way that we could possibly say that a lot of these things that we can't really attach so much to a physical phenomenon may also make sense? Because it seems like a lot of the practices of these mystery schools had to definitely do with this understanding that there is more to life than just whatever it is physically presented.
Yeah, I wouldn't pick this topic to debate. I don't feel like I necessarily have anything super hardcore. It's one of those things the important part is accepting that whether or not you believe in astrology, the ruling class does and always has, and has based every single thing they've ever done around it. So they seem to think it's interesting. I don't really fucking care, but
to your point, let me add to that, because the process of of having a priest come in, and kill an animal, check its entrails, look at its insides, and then say, "Oh, we shouldn't invade this town because the entrails are no good." Or an augur would say, "Those birds that just flew above our heads, those are crows. That's a bad omen. We can't move forward. We have to stay here." And so, for thousands of years, people operated this way. Cyrus, Alexander, Darius, name it. You name it.
Yeah, they weren't dummies.
And these are very educated. These are elite people, and they for whatever reason, this was the way things were done, and it stayed that way for a very long time.
And same thing in China, by the way. I gotta add the I Ching. That's another system in China that were used in the exact same way that you're talking about.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you don't continue to do things that aren't working. You do that if something's working, you continue to do it. So the fact that they were doing this for so long, thousands of years, it's like, what was it work? Like, what was going? Like, it makes you wonder why. So.
But as far as their goals go, now I think it's a good time to get to that. So we're talking about the Moonchild, Elon Musk, Antichrist. The Christian perspective is that this is all bad juju, and this is going to end badly for them when Jesus is going to come back. But then if we're talking about the cycles again, we had ancient Rome and we had Nero, and from what I understand, Jesus did not necessarily come back then with the golden cube and 1,000 years of peace and prosperity followed. So the question is, how much can people lean on a certain event like they were talking about with Jesus and the golden cube coming back? And after Drew, I'd be very interested in Neil's perspective on that too, where exactly that whole golden cube, New Jerusalem, where all that came from. So Drew, yeah, let me know what you think.
So yeah, as far as their goals, this is what I wanted to get into next. The goals of the what we would refer to as the New World Order, that being defined by a global governance, lack of democracy, a totalitarian, top-down, authoritarian state. All those things, and depopulation, of course, all those things you could have found written out in the Georgia Guidestones up until earlier last year.
Someone blew it up?
Yeah.
Yes, someone blew it up. I went there 3 months and 3 days before it blew up. So I got to see it one last time, but that was my second time there. But to go back to your point about people claiming to be, hiding under the guise of Christianity, which I think Freemasonry does quite a bit, and of course Rosicrucianism. They use the rose cross, so you're like, oh yeah, okay, it's whatever, they're Christian. The Guidestones did the exact same thing, where the anonymous group that put it up, the only name they left was a pseudonym, RC Christian, and they said, oh, it's just because we picked it because it's a group of Christians that did it. I mean, realistically, it's because of Rosicrucian. They're just fulfilling the same Rosicrucian goals of Francis Bacon.
Never thought of
it. There has been some more work done. People went up and dug some documents up that were supposed to be secret. They basically tricked the old man. I think, what's his name? Wyatt something. The old man who was the only guy who ever met the guy who came to actually give him the money. And they were eugenicists that were actually tied with Werner von Braun. They were friends with Werner von Braun.
Wow.
But well, actually, I'm sorry, not Werner von Braun, David Duke. So you could get a sense.
Wait, what was that? Wyatt man by any chance?
You could look it up.
I'm just fucking around with you. I'm just fucking around with you.
Yeah. Okay.
That was the guy who did that whole Happy Merchant comic. That was the origin of that meme. But anyway, yeah.
Oh, it's Wyatt Martin was the guy's name from Alberton, Georgia. But just to finish up this thought, so the Georgia Guidestones had all of the ideas. They had population control, which this is all Platonian. This is all Platonic. This is all stuff Plato talked about. Eugenics.
Yep.
And what stories you tell the people, et cetera, et cetera. And actually the idea of a central pillar with all of your your society's goals written on it or laws is actually based off of Plato's description of Atlantis, where they had orichalcum pillars in the middle that had all their and all their ideas or all their highest laws written on it. And the Georgia Guidestones were located less than I believe it's like an hour and a half outside of Atlanta, something around 100 miles away. And Atlanta itself, they have the phoenix as their city's icon because of Sherman's March, where they burned the entire city down. Which I believe was probably ritualistic as well. And then they used it as the headquarters. It used to be called Terminus because all the railroads went there from north, south, and then connected to the west. So that's why Coke, AT&T, the CDC, that's why all these things were started out of there. And it kind of was I don't know if I'd say it's the capital anymore, but they were, it was, and to some effect it is still today a major New World Order headquarters. But yeah,
interesting
I think
name
that's
too, by the way, Atlanta, because it's not called like the various names of the provinces of England or France. Like Atlanta, the only connection would be the Atlantic Ocean and Atlantis, right? That's it. Like there's no other country where they said like New England or New York or right. That does make it very special in a way.
A new Atlantis, just like Francis Bacon talked about. So again, they're fulfilling the RC Christian, the Rosicrucian goals. And I also wanted to bring up, because you brought up Thomas Paine.
Yes.
The only other piece of media that these people ever released, the creators of the Georgia Guidestones, is they gave out a pamphlet to each. They mailed a pamphlet to each member of Congress called, I believe it was A New Age of Reason. Hold on one sec.
Interesting.
But anyways, in there they talk about their goals, and very much in the same vein as Thomas Paine, where he's definitely not a Christian. Talks about the problems with the religion, etc. So I believe they shipped that out to Congress like 3 years afterwards.
Yeah. Now,
yeah.
I want to. So I think there should be a distinct. We should distinguish between the people who are looking back at Plato, and the people who are looking back at the Epicureans, because I think there needs to be that those two worldviews are so opposing each other. One of them gives us rationalism and the idea that there's no forms, there's no heaven and hell, and that everything is atoms and void. The other one is everything has forms, and there's you have the myth of and all that stuff. And I think Christianity comes out of Middle Platonism. So the whole world that the founding fathers are opposing is sort of Plato's worldview. Plato's worldview is materialized through the Christian Empire, the Byzantines and the Romans, and the Holy Roman Empire, I think, in my opinion. And I think what happens in the 18th and 19th century is you have people looking back to the time before Plato, where you had, because Plato hated democracy. He talks shit about democracy in his book, The Republic. He says it's basically for like, it's good for the poor, and it's good for like big cities, but like he talks about democracy the way like a conservative talks about liberalism in the Republic. And I think Plato is like, and Nietzsche even talks about this. Nietzsche's like, yeah, Christianity is basically just Platonism for the masses, for the people. I think they're all spot on about this. And I think, so I guess what I'm getting at is the idea of a new world order. Is it liberalism, or is it Plato's vision of Atlantis? Because I think those are two different things. I don't know if we can necessarily combine those two. I think they oppose each other.
So I wanted to just bring this up real quickly, because Plato, a lot of his works again were utopian, both talking about Atlantis as a type of previous utopia, and then debating, what's the best way to run a civilization in the Republic, and his idea of a philosopher king. That's exactly the role that a philosopher king ruling over a technocracy.
Yeah.
is exactly
It's like a
what
Pope
is being
too.
set up. It's what was talked about in Werner von Braun's The Mars Project. It's what Elon Musk talks about constantly. It's what he literally embodies. Oh, the connection which I didn't bring up earlier, which is important, is that his father, or his grandfather rather, was arrested in Canada 8 years before the Mars Project was written for running the Technocracy Party of Canada, and the government arrested him during World War II because they saw the Technocracy Party as a threat to the stability of the government. And of course, the Technocracy Party was international. It started in New York, I believe, and they had a division in Germany as well, which I'm 100% sure that von Braun was at least aware of, if not a fan of. But yeah, philosopher king ruling over technocracy. That's exactly what Musk is setting up right now. That's the role he's
But
going to
what do
play.
you think of Neil's reaction to this being close to the idea of a pope, a techno pope, if you will? Because as far as I understand, Neil, you see what's being done right now as possibly, why not, a return to a kind of very authoritarian-minded
Yeah.
Christianity.
Well, Thomas Jefferson says, "I am an Epicurean. I consider the genuine doctrines of Epicurus as everything rational and moral philosophy which Greek and Roman leave us." These, and Thomas Paine is obviously in the same mind as him, like in as far as looking back at history and aligning themselves with people in history for the future. And I think they oppose the Plato's utopia. I don't think they are necessarily drawing from Plato's utopia. So I don't know what Drew, what your thought? I guess my question for Drew is like, is this New World Order? Is it about liberalism and getting away from the church, or is it actually start saying, well, the church, they had some good ideas, but we want to take those ideas and do our own version of this and start a technocracy version of the church? Is that where I'm trying to understand? That's all.
Yeah, I think a new version of the church is accurate.
Okay.
And specifically, you can see how this is playing out right now. The beginning of the real hardcore um, version of a new world religion um, is being implemented under the three Jesuits that we just had in control of everything during the pandemic. You have Pope Francis, the first ever Jesuit Pope, which of course, they literally were like, oh yeah, we're not going to seek the papacy. We're not going to seek the papacy. And, they have a long history of, I mean, they're a secret society basically inside the Catholic Church.
They're cultists, man. I agree. They're cultists.
So what people don't realize is
The dude dresses like a wizard, man. He looks like a wizard. Look at him.
And they're very much they have been running. I think to this day still the biggest religion, Catholicism. I'm not 100% sure.
Probably the richest. It's arguably the richest. So
yeah, they got a great network still, and they're still got their Roman capital and everything. And
they know how to stay
it's very important too, because everything you were talking about earlier about Nero, how in Gematria Nero equals 666. Nero was the one who crucified Peter upside down in Nero Circus, which then eventually became Vatican, or became the Vatican. And literally that same obelisk was right there the entire time. It watched St. Peter get crucified upside down, the first post. And
that obelisk was brought by Augustus.
Yeah.
During when Rome is pagan still. It's still there. Like people don't realize that. There was a transition. The Vatican,
they just put a cross on top of it.
They converted to Christianity. They were the Roman imperial cult, and the Pontifex Maximus is the same title as the Pope. That was the high priest of the Roman imperial cult. So a lot of those traditions get carried over.
So then where does that put the OG Christianity in comparison? The Christianity that was persecuted by Nero, that then put its face on like a mask. So what about the original Christianity? Because that would be, in a way, the rebellion against...
You want to know what happened to those people? They're extinct because that type of Christianity can't survive. That type of Christianity, it calls for dropping out of society. living in a desert with a small commune of people,
Yeah,
starting a
it
little.
doesn't need a power structure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they don't. That old Christianity does not give a shit about who's the Roman emperor, who's the president, what government's doing. They want you. They want there to be a satanic government to kill them, because the greatest thing you can do is die for your faith. So that type of Christianity, you don't see that no more. It's gone.
Drew, do you agree we don't see that no more, or are there certain accounts on Twitter, let's say, that may be keeping that spirit alive?
I mean, yeah, I think there's some people that would probably see. There's a very fine line. I think that's always been. It's always, as someone raised Catholic and then obviously dove into all this stuff. There's a very fine line, because there's original interpretations. There's the Gnostic Gospels, the type of Christians that were hunted down after the Council of Nicaea and the complete takeover by the Roman cult, and the rebranding and everything of Christianity. And those Gospels, which we only know about, or we only know that they're legitimate because we found them in the Nag Hammadi Library in 1944 in clay canopic jars, I believe, in Upper Egypt, obviously hidden on purpose to preserve. Those, they, in my understanding, just like we were talking about, what I see as true Christianity, the real ideals are it's involves decentralization, individualism, and focusing on the internal. Your hope is not in this world.
I'll give you an example just to highlight what you're saying right now. This is the Jesus in the Gospel of Mary. The most powerful thing you ever hear Jesus say in any of the Gospels. He says, "Don't make laws like the lawless ones do." Like, what? This is that, and that to me. When I heard that, I said, that sounds like, I thought, authentic. Sounds like something Jesus, because he was in very much opposition to this law way, the way of doing law, so that the law can keep you in straight. Where he was more aligned with, like, you don't need the law, be perfect. You know what I mean? So that's why I'm saying the Gnostic Gospels, when Jesus is speaking in those Gospels, it's a different Jesus, but it's one that's way more believable, in my opinion.
Yeah, I certainly think that, and a lot of the really interesting part, which is why I'm like pausing before I talk here, is because there's so much of what Gnostic Christianity, and those Gospels, what they talk about, that lines up with what people refer to now as Satanism and Luciferianism. And I think the big distinction here, and why I wouldn't call myself like a Gnostic Christian, is because your salvation is not in, well, at least in my personal view, the true vein of Christianity is not in gnosis is not salvation. Knowing everything doesn't bring you any peace, and it doesn't, you'll never know everything. The more you learn, the less you know, in a way, and the more ignorant you find out you actually are. So this like idea of salvation through gnosis is bunk, and I think that's what a lot of Luciferianism, and especially it's what Musk represents at the end of the day, is as the knowledge bearer. He's, just to flesh out that idea, obviously he plans on merging with machines. It's what all the predictive programming with him is about, like the Deus Ex video game, Cyborg, Neuralink. He basically gave the funding for OpenAI to create ChatGPT, and now he's created his own XAI, which the X is, it's the cross as well. It's his cross, but. That goes to the crook and flail that we were talking about before. It's another sign of pharaonic rule, and him becoming the Horus, the new Horus, to rule the age of Horus, which is the New World Order, which is what that Horus bird is the same reason why we have the eagle. If you look at the eagle and the even going back to the Roman, they have the same type of symbolism as their crest, with the big bird holding stuff in his talons. That's all Horus.
Also in the Hermetic text, the Corpus Hermetica, Horus is the divine child, the Soter, the savior, and he was in the Hermetic religion. It was fused with Apollo and Eros, the god of love, Eros, and they called him Harpocrates. This actually, Harpocrates, there was a early Christian. He was claiming to be a student of John. He lived in Egypt. His name was Harpocrates, and he was one of the earliest Gnostics that we have data on. The only reason why we still know who he is because of the refutations of the heresies from Irenaeus, Hippolytus, and Justin Martyr. And they talk about this guy, and he started a group of Christians. He claimed to be a student of John. This is going back to the late 1st century, early 2nd century. And he had a son who was named Epiphanes or something, Epiphanes. And his son died in the year 110 of the Common Era. And they deified him, set up an altar and a library, basically a church, named after this child of Harpocrates. And this was one of the best documented times of apotheosis in early Christianity that we have. Why I'm bringing that up? The reason why I'm bringing that up is because in early Christianity, it's not just Jesus who becomes divine and becomes worthy of worship. Anybody who's flesh has the ability to reach gnosis or apotheosis, you can call it. And it's not just gaining knowledge. It's a state of perfection that one reaches where they are worthy of deification rituals. They have exited the realm of reincarnation. And yes, early Christians did believe in reincarnation. They called it transmigration of the soul. They didn't call it reincarnation. They called it They said they thought that John the Baptist was a transmigrated Elijah. So the Bible even backs this up. This is not just made up heresy.
And the Jews also believe that, by the way. They call it Gilgul, I believe.
Yeah, there's an idea of transmigration of the soul. It's big in Platonism, by the way. Plato was all about this, going in.
That ties into the Pharaohs thing and the rule by mythology and that same.
The reason why I bring that up, and I'm going to give it right back to you because this is what I was leading up to, is that there was a different group of Christians early on. And I don't know if the Rosicrucians are going back to this. I don't know if you want to call the word Gnostic is like, they didn't call themselves Gnostics. They just had their own, like there was the Carpocratians, there was the Nacenes, there was the Valentinians, they didn't call themselves Gnostics, they called themselves those groups. So that's what they call themselves. Christianoi is a later middle 2nd century when they started calling themselves that. There were some Christians calling themselves that in Syria, supposedly. I don't know, but like that wasn't like a real thing until later. But anyways, the reason I'm bringing that up is because these Christians had a totally opposite, you can call it Luciferian or Satanic, view of the Bible. They thought that the Old Testament God was wicked and evil because
Demiurge, right?
Demiurge, yeah. Plato said a God can't be jealous. Says it right in his book, The Republic. Timaeus. He says, God can't be jealous. If the God's jealous, it's not the real God. The monad is perfect. So these early Christians who were Platonists, they were Middle Platonists, they recognized that and said, the Old Testament God is not the real true creator. He thinks he is, but he's wrong. So stemming from that theology, you get groups called Cainites, Nacenes, Ophites. These are people who are drawing their theology from the great thinkers of ancient Greece, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. And they're looking at those figures as the prophets instead of the other Christians from Israel who are looking at Isaiah and Hosea and Jeremiah, and they put those people up as prophets. These Christians actually had statues of Plato and Pythagoras in their churches. We know that from Irenaeus. So I think I'm going to bring it back full circle because I think this is what these Rosicrucian, Luciferian Christians are bringing back, this type of Christianity.
Yeah. So I think you're right. I think that is what they that is a lot of what they're, especially how they symbolize that is, again, the rose cross, used in the 8-pointed star, representing the bring back the divine feminine, or Babalon, the birth,
Inanna,
the new
Ishtar.
the new age of Horus. And that's what, of course, Crowley specifically said, was that he believed that there was a previous matriarchal society where, everybody worshipped Athena and the matriarchal, and then we focused very much on just the male under like the Osiris New Kingdom. So you just had Osiris and Horus. There's two males. They're just all the pharaohs.
The
But
vel-
what? Oh, just one. So to get to your point, I think you'll really like this. I think this might actually connect with Elon for you, so you can kind of understand where I'm coming from. Is of course what you were talking about, the demiurge, and how it's not the true God. The idea that in these Gnostic Gospels, which again found like the ones found in the Nag Hammadi library, they describe the creator of the physical world as separate from, the one true overall etheric, 5-dimensional type God is how I would describe it personally. But they talk about the demiurge and his archons, which are all, again, in some way artificial. They don't have the same connection to the divine as humanity. And for that reason, they're jealous. And their goal is to get humanity to forget its divinity and continue to feed all of their energy to the archon, or to the archons and the demiurge. And what is that? What I see that representing is this coming AI and the fusion. What's the ultimate? Giving up your divinity and worshiping technology is completely fusing with it. Transhumanism. And that's what Elon Musk is here to convince the world of, because Elon Musk is, he's definitely not a Christian. He definitely does not believe in any type of spirituality. And he literally just said, I'm not sure, on his interview with Tucker, like last week, he was like, oh, well, I kind of like the idea of a soul. I guess I feel like I have one, but do I really? I'm not sure. So that's ultimately him. He is the fulfillment of what the Gnostics were warning us about. In these thousands of years before we even knew about artificial intelligence, they still somehow had a concept of it.
Yeah, and one of the big themes in a lot of these quote Gnostic groups that we call them is the idea of exiting this realm of materialism and becoming one with the pleroma, that apotheosis, exiting the cycle of reincarnation and becoming your final perfect form of yourself. It's very Platonist. But this is the thing about Elon. If Elon Musk was to go back in time and present this idea that you can become one with AI and upload your consciousness into a computer and exit this material realm and go into this other realm where the sky's the limit. You're just going to live in space eternally, powered by the stars, and you're just going to float around in this indestructible tube and just be able to control your surroundings. You're a god now.
Immortal, yeah.
You're immortal. You're a god. You're in your own universe. You can create people to talk to. They're AI. They seem real to you. Everything feels real, smells real, tastes real. Is that like what Jesus did in a way, where Jesus says, if you follow me, I'll bring you to heaven. Believe in me. Is it another?
Well, it's a similar thing, but it's also
Why not?
in some ways the exact opposite.
Wait, I'll tell you why not quickly.
It would make
some mad dudes.
The opposite.
It's a polar opposite.
It's a polar opposite, but also, Neil, some mad dudes could come in with a hammer and they could just whack your body while it's in that state, and then you're gone. Then you're dead.
Who?
Some mad dudes, they could just come in while you're hooked up to the Matrix, and they could just whack it with a hammer.
You're dead. You're uploaded your consciousness. Your body's gone. You don't need your body anymore.
Then they'll destroy the server farm. They'll do whatever. The point is that you're still dependent. You're still dependent on being somewhere, with ones and zeros. What I'm saying is that's the limitation, and the difference with what you're saying and what, let's say, all of these mystery school traditions are saying is that the goal, in my opinion, is to work on your willpower and to be able to surpass certain limitations by your own works, not by having ones and zeros do it for you, because at that point you actually start devolving into the state of an animal because you're not working on yourself. That's what I personally believe. I don't know, Drew, if you agree, disagree.
Yeah, no, I think you basically you painted the picture perfectly. So imagine, just like you described there, imagine Elon Musk in probably a decade or less. He's going to come on TV and he's going to say, not only do we got Neuralink, guys, we've also got full on upload your consciousness. You can live forever. You can have whatever you want. You can have it all instantly. And yeah, he's going to offer people heaven via upload. But in reality, this is a classic. One of my favorite philosophers, Alan Watts, which I'm sure have you ever listened to any of his
Oh, I
stuff?
love Alan Watts.
So yeah, he does this one thought experiment where he's like, well, if you find yourself in like constant agony of this world, then just imagine you actually did get everything you wanted as soon as you wanted it. How quickly would you lose interest in every possible pleasure of earth? Every materialistic pleasure would mean nothing to you. And then how quickly would you just turn to pain and just become a complete, just become what we think of as a Satanist, where the only joy you can get is by doing complete horrible things and torturing other people. And that's why they do that at the highest levels, is that's the only thing money can't buy. That's the only thing that they can get, they can truly have, that nobody else can, because of their absolute power. But yeah, no, exactly. Imagine the secular world that we live in today, where even very smart people I know have no concept of spirituality or any type of idea of divinity. As soon as they get the option to jack in and jack off into the
Plato's Goon Cave.
metaverse.
Plato's Goon Cave. That's what that is.
They're gone, and that's what in Revelation 9:6, and in those days men shall seek death and shall not find it, and shall desire to die, and death shall flee from them. That's exactly what's being set up. And just like you said, it sounds exactly like it's an exact mirror of Jesus's message, but it's applicable for secular people that are purely materialists. They have they've never had a concept of, they've never experienced anything outside of their materialism, pure quantum realm. So they're 100% going to plug right in.
Wait, before
the
Neil,
Epicurean mind was this is the greatest achievement for the Epicurean mind, because there is no afterlife. You're done. So you're extending reality, and not only extending reality, you're having all the options that you can. Epicureans are all about eat, drink, be merry. Like this is the
do what thou wilt. Do what thou wilt.
It's literally heaven for
Crowley?
the Epicurean, Luciferian mindset. Yeah.
Wait, but to be fair to the Epicureans, though, from what I understood, their whole thing was not just like gorging yourself on bonbons, but doing certain things in measured ways so that you get the most experience out of it without necessarily getting to that point of being overwhelmed by sensations. So I think at least the old school Epicureans seem to have a better way of doing this. But to another point, though, what's weird to me about this whole comparison with, let's say, Elon Musk and all these cats to these ancient mystery school traditions is that I'm sure somebody like, let's say, even Jack Parsons, for instance, if he was so into all these rituals, I am pretty sure he would have known at least about Kundalini energy and being able to meditate in such a way as to bring that energy up to the higher levels of the spine and all that. But if you're aware that's
exactly what the sex magic rituals. That's what they mean.
But
they talk about the whore of Babylon. Oh, I'll let you.
No. Go on.
In one sec. The reason why they talk about things like the whore of Babylon, the word whore, it just means whole ultimately, and what it originally meant, like when you talk about like these ancient sex alchemists and these ancient sex cults, what they were doing sex magic with the whores. That's what a whore was used for.
Porneia
was to perform sex magic, which is basically a sexual transmutation, not ejaculating, but doing the sex act with intention. But go ahead.
But when you get to that point, though, when you get the Kundalini up the spine, I do not equivocate that with, let's say, plugging yourself into some artificial ones and zeros type matrix. What I would equivalent that to is actually being able to unlock other higher, let's say, states of consciousness that otherwise you would not have. And this is why I'm kind of at an impasse here when it comes to, well, what exactly are these people doing today? Because if they are talking about having Neuralink be the thing that gets them from 0 to 1, then they're totally, I think, spitting and stomping on the entire legacy of the people who came before them, because their whole thing was actually work on yourself, work on your inner world, and now they just want to build all this stuff. And
it's not for them. It's not for them. They're not the ones doing it. They're just getting rid of everyone else.
Yeah, that's
gotcha.
the question. Those are two separate. Those are two separate, completely separate things.
Interesting.
They don't necessarily have to be compared to each other. One In
Yeah.
one sense, you have the meditation mindset where you're practicing your principles, and in the other sense, it's getting to a place of desired place. There's not necessarily, you don't have to, like, I think, Lev, what your tendency is to like bring those two together and compare them as if they needed to be compared. They really don't. They're two different things.
I wouldn't say they're two different things if one person decides to do both. If one person decides to plug into the
It's like
matrix
saying,
with a mind chip while at the same time trying to meditate, all I'm saying is that they're gonna have a fucking hard time meditating when they have all of this sensory input going into their brain, which is, by the way, the reason why when people meditate they prefer doing it in a darkened room. They prefer
right.
doing it
Yeah, but what's the
while
difference? If you can do all that, if you can control all those settings,
because you're not controlling them. It's being controlled for you. That's the
no,
difference.
what's the difference if the reality, if the experience is exactly the same? What's the difference?
Because either you define life as being one where every single thing has a meaning like every choice, every
What
thought,
is
every single thing
you
we do
totally
has a
does.
meaning. Then when you have something that's being done for you, it means that you are not participating in the action yourself. You are not willing yourself
But
into having a
that's
certain
not
kind of experience.
that's
I
not
think
my
that
question.
matters. I think that matters. I don't know, Drew, do you agree with me? Do you agree with Neil?
Yeah, no, I mean, so it's ultimately, we're again talking about a theoretical,
Yes.
metaverse matrix type situation, and of course the matrix, which was made, uh, if you notice how much it's entered like the mainstream lexicon now, talking about the matrix and simulation theory, which Elon Musk has done a lot to promote. Um, it in it kind of describes, well, in the Matrix movie itself, Neo, the movie begins and ends in room 303, which is 33. Jesus died at 33 years old. um, he was, resurrected in 3 days, and Neo is also dies and is resurrected. That's when he becomes like immortal in the Matrix, is in front of room 303. But so it's there's a fusion of these two concepts, but the idea here is that one group of people, if you are secular, there is no logical reason why you wouldn't accept, okay, I'm going to die, should I jack my consciousness into the computer? Absolutely, 100%. There's no reason why anyone would. If you don't have faith, if you don't
Why
have
not?
any sense of spirituality, you will 100% do it. And that is, you're going to find yourself, if you have the option. That's the problem with humanity, is we don't actually know what we want. If we got everything we wanted as soon as we want it, we would be in hell.
Yes.
You would have nothing to desire.
That's why.
Our
That's the
humanity
answer.
is not. We're not built for that type of logic. And that's, I mean, they literally talk about it in the Matrix. They say originally they created the Matrix as like a utopia paradise. And this really gets down to the bottom of all utopian ideals, because it's ultimately that is a utopia as well. As if, everyone's in a pod, they're getting exactly what they
Yeah.
want, and the rest of the world, we can have it on auto, terraforming, make everything beautiful, etc., etc. But ultimately, what all these utopian ideas, if you notice, there's one common theme, is that both Plato's Timaeus and Critias, I forget which one, where he's describing the laws of Atlantis, right before he goes into the laws, the dialogue ends. There's no
Yeah,
more of it.
right.
And the
Mm.
same thing with Francis Bacon's New Atlantis. Before it ends before it's just incomplete.
Secret.
So all the utopian ideas are always incomplete because there's no way to do it. It's an internal state. Hold on one second. I'll just finish this thought. It's
Yeah.
an internal state. Getting everything you want is not it. You're still going to be miserable. You're always going to find you need a challenge. And the other thing is that complete gnosis, and knowing exactly, like on a quantum reality, having an AI that could predict your entire life for you is, it, one, takes away all the fun, and two, there's still a basically, with quantum physics experiments, we find out we're not even living in a quantum reality. There is a certain unpredictable aspect that happens as a result of us just observing things. We actively change them as we observe them. And yeah, so gnosis isn't the answer. The answer is to have faith and accept that what our experience is perfect as it is right now. And that's what that is the ultimate, where the between the do what thou wilt, which I see as the Luciferian Satanism
Yeah.
Gnostic, compared to a more what I see as the true Christianity, which throw my hat in with every other person that's ever lived, is I think it's about accepting that faith, and faith is the answer. Giving up the power, not trying to get as much power over your environment, but delegating it. And trust and love is the way to live in the best way possible, and accept that things end and that you're going to die. And if you don't have that type of spirituality or that viewpoint, then you will jack into the matrix, and Elon's going to have your soul.
So what you're talking, what we're actually leading into now is the very ancient debate, the ages, the thousands of years of Epicureanism versus Platonism, which I think is the two main worldviews that stem everything else. Liberalism, conservative.
How do you spell that name that you keep? What's the one with the E
Epicurean.
here?
EpicureinIsm. It's from Epicurus. He was a student of the school of Democritus. Democritus.
Okay, awesome.
These were the rationalists of ancient Greece. These are the people who opposed the the superstitious religious people. They were the scientific minds. They were the ones. By the way, Democritus, thousands of years before we had microscopes, was theorizing atomic theory. This is how smart these people were. He theorized that the universe is made up of atoms and void. This is it. This is it. There's no other realms. We're here. This is it. So you could, in a way, you can say that the Epicureans were basically the fedora atheists of their time, even if they participated in the rites because they knew that there was something to there were some pleasures, there were some pluses in being involved in these rites and attending the festivals every month, all that stuff. They weren't like the new atheism, like anti-theists. They weren't like that. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is because even the Epicureans, who are charged with being not religious and being rationalists, even they, as central to their doctrines was the idea of that you can't have what you want. You have in order to understand what good is, you have to understand what bad is. So you even have this mentality of, and so what I'm getting at is, if you had this in this thought experiment, if you did have the option to jump into a computer and just be perfect, yeah, I think that would get depressing after a period of time. I think you would end up being bored. I actually agree with that. And guess what? The universe that we're in, there's going to be a heat death eventually. So no matter what, even if you are in a device floating around in space, that's going to die one day. There is no escaping death. So at some point, whether you're a Christian or not, now I'm going above both of these worldviews now. At some point, you do have to just throw your head in and say, whatever happens, happens. And when this universe ends, who knows what's going to happen after that? Maybe there is something bigger than this. A lot of the Epicureans were deists. They believed in a first mover, but this first mover has no control. Spinoza was one of these people. Thomas Paine was one of these people. These people thought that there was a creator, but this creator basically is the architect of everything in the universe. And then as soon as they started the universe off, they're gone. They're not affecting world stuff. They're not like changing elections or making a sports team win or anything like that. They're not answering prayers. They're not doing anything like that. But there's the idea of, when this is all over, what is this deity going to do? Is he going to bring back the consciousness of everybody? So the Epicureans would say, just like throwing your hat in and saying, I don't know what's going to happen to me, is a victory over death. Because you no longer, one of the central doctrines of Epicureanism is to not fear death. Is to not even don't even think about it.
It's a key part of all the initiation ceremonies of just about every secret society. Skull and Bones, they have you climb into a coffin. Like Shaolin monks, they'll stop your heart and then resuscitate you. Or
you are dead.
Yeah.
The only thing promised is that you are going to die.
The assassins cult of that the Crusaders ran
Hassan
into.
Saba, yeah.
Yeah. Hassan, yeah. Isn't that fitting for today's day and age, with his little suicide cult he runs? But they literally, they're what they would do is they get the young inductees, the kids, they get them hopped up on hopium, like fucking, have them fucking smoke their weed pen 24/7 while watching you on stream, and then when they wake up in the hopium days, or the opium days, he would have them wake up in a garden full of virgins, and then he'd put them back into sleep, wake them up, and then say, "Oh, there you go. We just showed you heaven." So that's what's going to happen if you just follow my lead, do everything I say. Then you'll go back there when you die. And so to prove that, the first like Western experience we have recorded of in getting involved with these people, the assassins and Hassan, was that homeboy goes, check this out, to the Crusaders, to the Templars. He goes, yo, he calls out to his guys in the guard tower. He says, jump. And a bunch of them just jump off the side straight to their death on the rocks. And that was his way of showing exactly what power. But yeah, the no fear over death is extremely important to all
here, so you know who Diogenes is, right? The great thinker Diogenes, who met Alexander the Great and told him to get out of my sunlight. He was
no, I didn't.
So Diogenes was from Sinope. He's from the same time as Plato. Him and Plato hated each other. It was the biggest beef of the time. If you were living in Athens, you were watching them debate all the time about shit and yelling at each other, calling each other stupid. Diogenes was one of the big, I guess you would say, like he was a cynic. So the Cynics influenced both the Epicureans and the Stoics. Cynicism is like the father of both of those schools. And he said, this is so amazing. I love this guy. I love Diogenes. He's one of my favorite people of all time. Then when his disciples asked him, he was getting up there in age. He's like 100 years old. This guy's living out in the wilderness, eating bugs, and like he was like didn't give a shit about society. He didn't give a shit about Plato. He thought Plato was like basically like one of those like Ivy League like douchebags. He can't always talking shit about Plato. Living out in a barrel with dogs surrounding him as a homeless person. This is the type of life he was living. And one day his disciples said, "What do you want us to do with your body after you die?" He said, "You know what? This is what I want you guys to do. See that bridge over there?" They're like, "Yeah." "All right, bring me over that bridge. Tie a sword to my hand. Throw me over the bridge into the water so that then I can fight the fishes." And they go, "How are you going to fight the fishes if you're dead?" And he looks at them and says, "Exactly. Why the hell should I care about my body after I'm dead?" And it was like, it's one of those like, boom, like one of those like real, I guess you could say it's Epicurean, it's Stoic, it's rational, but it's also like, why are we scared of death and rituals of after our afterlife? It's going to happen no matter what. Like, why should we even fear it? Like, you should not waste your time worrying about dying. You should waste your time spending your life and enjoying your life and being good and becoming a better person for the world around you, you know?
But then there is also the question of when you're talking about becoming a better person. And while I agree with Drew that becoming a better person, I think, is extremely important, and just having knowledge is not enough, because I think being a better person goes hand in hand with understanding what exactly all this is about. I wouldn't necessarily say that the only reason why we're here is to just be a good person, and it has nothing at all to do with gaining any kind of knowledge. Where when we're talking about the virtual reality existence with the ones and zeros, like Drew was talking about, it can become like an actual hell, like that Twilight Zone episode about that gambler who keeps winning every single game in the afterlife and then finds out that it's actually hell. But the big difference, I think, here is that there is a closed loop that ends up happening in both cases. In the case where, let's say you have like people living in a certain Middle Ages lifestyle and they just do whatever the church tells them to, and they keep repeating and repeating the cycle for thousands of years. And that's all fine, but you're not really getting anywhere beyond, your usual human foibles. And the question always arises like, well, what is beyond there? And is it necessarily so that just being a good person, having the family, that's going to be all that this was ever meant to be. That's number one. But number two, there was another closed loop of the virtual reality landscape where we are only going to be able to experience what we think of as pleasurable, only the things that we know how to simulate. And then the question is, well, what's beyond that? How are we so fucking confident in our own ability to understand what this is all about that we are going to create a world that's going to give us all the answers? I highly doubt it. So in a way, when you create this virtual reality world that, Neil, you were saying, well, what's the difference between that and that? In that VR world, we only have the knowledge that we currently have now. While if we actually train ourselves, I think it is possible to, through apotheosis or whatever you want to call it, to unlock other states that you would not necessarily be able to just neatly put into the ones and zeros environment. So the idea is to go beyond that cycle. But I don't know. Drew, what do you think? Oh, and also for the Twitter space people, be sure to click on the link in the Jumbotron, because I know that you guys are saying that the sound is weird. This whole Twitter space is for the sake of driving people to YouTube. So be sure to knock the hell out of that subscribe button and the bell and the like button. Anyway, and also need those super chats. We're going to do those at the end. Anyway, Drew, go for it.
This is a real interesting way we've taken this conversation, which I do enjoy. I mean, it does ultimately get down to the core of the crux of why I think what I do about Elon. But if we want to talk about the highest level, what's the meaning of life type shit, I think my good friend Donnie Darkind put it in a really good way the other day. Was that it's not, we're not, our hope is not in this world. And we're not supposed to, take over the world or whatever. We're not supposed to be so worried about winning the culture war or whatever. It's victory over sin that we need to worry about. And sin is, obviously means a lot of different things to different people, but it's basically self-harming actions that take you farther away from source and divinity, which is ultimately where you're going to feel the best. But yeah, that's my general view. It's people spend that classic adage about if you want to change the world, start with yourself or whatever. That is at the end of the day the most important thing. And I think part of my mission is, as much as what I do looks like me trying to win over the rulers of the world or whatever, ultimately that's the all I want to do is give the script to people so that they can stop giving their energy to false idols, and then you can focus that energy internally and figure out what you really think about yourself and what you really want to do, and stop giving your literal emotional energy over to the events of the world, whether or not, is Trump going to win the election? Is Biden going to win? What's going on? Instead of, actually focusing on improving your life and your legacy, your family, et cetera, et cetera.
Neil, do you agree?
Yeah, sure. I mean, at the end of the day, your world is what you make. I mean, this life is kind of what you make it. I do believe in the. I don't necessarily agree with the Stoic sense that you have to just accept your lot and just take it. I do think that there are ways to improve and to benefit the world around you in ways that you can control. But I do want to say this though. I think that if people who think we went off topic, we actually didn't, because Elon Musk's his artistic expression of having symbolism of Artemis and Apollo as these symbols of voyagers in the sky, basically, that is very much in the vein of Luciferianism, because I mean these are ancient symbols of Greek gods who had the title of being Luciferian. Diana or Artemis her title was Luciferia. She was the light bringer. Same with Apollo, the bright one. Apollo was kicked out of heaven, and just like Lucifer is in Milton Friedman's book. So in that, and Milton Friedman,
John Milton.
John, I'm sorry,
Milton Friedman.
That's The Economist. John Milton's book about Lucifer is drawing. It's not from a Bible text. It's drawing from, well, it is drawing from Isaiah with the fall of Lucifer, but that's only a little sentence. It's mostly drawing from the story of Prometheus, Enoch, the fallen angels, but also Apollo, the beautiful lyre playing light giver. That's Apollo. He's describing Apollo. Basically, the image of Lucifer in that book is the image of Apollo. And so what happens is Luciferianism and Satanism is paganism incarnate. So Lucifer as a deity, as a higher power, as an artistic expression, however you want to call it, whichever way you want to describe it, we're just language at this point. That is the old pagan traditions incarnate into a deity. And that's so to the eyes of the Christians, Judeo-Christian Muslims, that's Satan. To the eyes of the others, to the people who oppose Judeo-Christian Islam, that's the light bringer. That's light. That's God. That's the greatest thing. That's the highest ideal there is. It's the monad. So it depends on how you look at it.
Yeah, I think Lucifer, Lucifer, the word Lucifer to refer to the devil, I believe, was first used in the King James Bible. So effectively, it was Francis Bacon and the Rosicrucians who put that in there.
Good point, dude. Good point. Because you don't get, you have Lucifer in the Latin Bible. Like that's in the Latin Bible. The English Bible draws from Jerome's Latin text, and Lucifer being the fallen one in Isaiah. That was not that in Hebrew. It's Hallel ben Shechor. It's dawn, son of the dawn, son of the dawn. It's Venus basically in the sky. So Isaiah is talking about the king of Babylon falling from his high position. He's not saying Hallel ben Shechor is evil. He's saying, look how high and great Venus is. You were like Venus, and then you fell. Isaiah has nothing bad to say about Lucifer. But like you said, in the King James Bible, it becomes the bad guy. It becomes the fallen angel.
Which is funny, by the way, because the King James Bible was allegedly, like we talked about before, written by Sir Francis Bacon, who was all about a lot of this Luciferian stuff. So what does that tell you? Why is he leading us astray? What's going on here, you think? Because I don't understand. Yeah.
So that's a real interesting question. I think that this is good because it will advance a little further into what I see as the American Apocalypse X. And the X is obviously very important, given it's basically, it originally was the X was used by very early Christians in the Phoenician alphabet. It was the last letter, so it basically represented, the perfection, completion, etc. And some of the earliest Christians were seen using, an X symbolism. And there's also a rune, the G rune. I think it's Gabor. And that rune is basically what's also, it stands for basically like sex and creation, etc. And that also is where, Freemasonry takes the G from as well. But to get to that point you just made about this idea of the Lightbringer also being, Satan and etc., is what I see coming as far as I think a lot of people in the conspiracy theory, and actually it's now becoming very mainstream as they continue to do more and more disclosure about UFOs. And now that, the Navy is officially recognized it, and there's whistleblowers all over the place talking about hundreds and hundreds of different radar blips starting after World War II. And actually a lot of people point to when Parsons first did the Babalon working, then we had Roswell very shortly after. 3 months after Roswell, we get the CIA and Air Force are started basically to compartmentalize all the information and the various scenarios brought up by Roswell. And so anyways, and also right after Parsons died, we had one of the craziest public UFO sightings, which was a bunch of UFOs over the White House and literally scrambled fighters. Yeah, Foo Fighters was what they referred to in World War II. over Europe, I believe, is where that first originated. Um, but yeah, so that people said that was in response to his death, which he blew up in a factory in his garage like laboratory. So who knows? That could have been a killing of the king type thing where they offed him, but because he did fall out of grace with the U.S. government for a lot of reasons. But long story
Wait,
short,
that's how he died?
yeah, he blew up in his factory, yeah, in like his garage.
Whoa.
So yeah, and he like with the U.S. government, they kind of like obviously JPL majorly helped out with the Apollo program and all this stuff, but basically because of his occultism and then like his allegiances to Thelema during the Cold War, they were obviously on the lookout for anyone with other allegiances, so they kind of had a falling out with him. But anyways, what I see coming as like the part of this apocalypse is very much in tune with the other guy, the religion started by the other guy who was in the Babalon working, L. Ron Hubbard, who's been basically effectively been the biggest influence in Hollywood since. Think of all the movies that even people that aren't publicly Scientologists, for instance, Will Smith, who isn't publicly a Scientologist, but him and his wife started a Scientology school for children in LA and had their own kids go to it, which explains why they're so fucked up. But and there's a lot of Scientology's got hitters, so there's going to be people coming for me for this, and they do have some really great takes on pharma and psychology.
Yes.
And I'm sure Hubbard's been unreasonably slandered in some ways, but why I say they got hitters is because they specifically refer to themselves as not being a turn the other cheek religion.
Right.
So remember when Will Smith slapped Chris Rock slapped him on stage? That is in Scientology. If someone disrespects you, you either slap them or a higher ranking person in Scientology slaps you.
Yeah.
So that was a huge dog whistle for anyone in the know. They knew exactly what the whole controversy was about. And it's basically a humiliation ritual for Will Smith and it helping to emasculate men and destroy any semblance of a solid family structure we have in the U.S. That family is an absolute shit show. And anyone that looks up to them is going to have an insanely dysfunctional family. But, anyway, Scientology, what their actual religion, which they don't talk about publicly, only once you get in and you go to a higher level by donating hundreds of thousands of dollars, is they talk about this alien god who brought humanity here, hundreds of thousands of years ago or whatever. I forget the exact lore, but his name starts with an X. And yeah, so their religion itself,
Xenu.
Scientology,
Xenu.
yeah, Xenu, yeah. So their religion itself is very tied into aliens. So imagine what happens when we get this eventual alien disclosure. Where does everybody run to? Oh, suddenly finds out that we have aliens, and of course they're going to say, "Oh, we created you. We are the Anunnaki." Blah blah. Which might have. I mean, it's possible that there is a separate species. Which I don't. There's no reason to think that they're extraterrestrial. They, there's
Could have come from
anytime
Agartha.
people talk about UFOs. Yeah, exactly. Why it's in my view more likely that it comes from inside the Earth. But anyways, when that happens, Scientology, they have the biggest, most popular people already behind it. Already the people that people are worshiping as idols, icons, living gods that have actually played gods on TV, aka superheroes. You have the whole Marvel cast. You have Will Smith and Tom Cruise, etc., etc. When they bring out the aliens, and I guarantee you, whatever they're going to spin is going to be very similar to what Scientology's been telling people behind closed doors. There's already super well-funded, elite cult is going to take a huge amount of the mind share of the population of the earth, which is now not only are the secular people now like, oh, fuck, there's alien gods. Oh, shit. There's also going to be a huge amount of depressed religious people who see the existence of these aliens as nullifying everything they've ever been taught.
Right.
So that's going to be a huge part of it, and that
Scientology
has the cross, the rose cross. So it's the final progression, and that's what brings in the new world order, because we'll need a one world government to communicate with them.
Notice
And
how
yeah,
the
that's my
Catholic
story.
Church. Notice how the Catholic Church has already recently come out and said if aliens do exist, we don't like that doesn't change anything. Like they're already setting themselves up for the possibility of that information coming out, so that they don't have to look like idiots when it does happen. They're saying, yeah, aliens exist, so Jesus is still, yeah, Christianity's still good.
And they own all the observatories. They've always owned all the
Yeah. Oh,
telescopes.
yeah. They're like, well, let's not forget, like all the Big Bang theorist was a Catholic. Galileo, obviously, like the Catholic Church is so embedded in like the academia history and the study of the universe that's just a part of that's just another player along with other with like Harvard or CERN or like all these big players in the spaces of like
Well, the Da Vinci Code gives a real good look, because it literally showed what happened in the Catholic Church, and in a way kind of does some predictive programming what's even to come. But the the secret society within the church usurping the current pope and then having a new one come in who's part of the group, aka the Jesuits. You watch the Da Vinci Code?
yeah, it's
Okay,
interesting.
so yeah, I mean, they basically showed it right there. They're like, oh yeah, well, the secret society guy's going to take over, and then next thing you know, you have Benedict step down, first pope in, I believe, 500, 600 years at a minimum to step down before dying.
That's it. Yeah,
And then you got Francis pop in. Oh yeah, sorry about that whole I'm not going to seek the papacy thing. Psych.
right. It's crazy. It's wild stuff, and it makes you wonder with all the wealth and all the resources that go behind these figures in the church, not just the pope but the bishops and the cardinals. They all have a crew of basically mafia underneath these people, like, and so you have to wonder what the hell is going on in the inner politics of the Catholic Church that we don't even know about. Like there's probably so much shit that we don't even know about that's going on with this.
Yeah, and what's really important too, to just kind of go back to that original theme, because again, a lot of what I'm setting up in the American Apocalypse is basically showing the reoccurrence of the same cycle. The same way from the age of Aries into Pisces, we're having a very similar setup from the age of Pisces into Aquarius. So there you had the death of the Roman Republic and the beginning of the Roman Empire, starting with Julius Caesar being voted out of power January 7th, 49 BC. What did we have in the U.S.? We had Donald Trump was voted out of power on January 7th of 2021, but the only reason it was on January 7th was that it was pushed back several hours because of the insurrection. And I'm sure you're familiar with the phrase "crossing the Rubicon."
Yeah,
You heard about?
Mhm.
Yeah. So
So-
that is why
so-
Julius Caesar
so-
crossed the
right.
Rubicon, was because he was voted out of power on January 7th.
But-
So
and
we see, yeah.
it actually goes deeper than that, because 40 years before Caesar did it, Caesar was still alive, and he witnessed his uncle's rival, his uncle Marius' rival Sulla, who did exactly what Caesar did, rounded up his troops, crossed the Rubicon, walked into the Senate, said, "I'm taking this bitch over. Rome's mine for the time being," and he did that. And Caesar took the playbook from Sulla and did exactly the same thing. So yeah, there's the idea of crossing the Rubicon is something like a paradigm shift. It's something like a takeover status. It becomes a phrase, crossing the Rubicon. Like anybody, it doesn't have to be in Rome anymore. It can be anything now.
Oh, you are muted right now, Drew.
We saw it kind of repeated as well with Washington crossing the Delaware on
Right.
Christmas, because January 7th was originally Christmas in the for the Greek Orthodox, and
January 6th, I think it was January 6th.
It could be. I think
Which is interesting.
I know
January 6th.
Greek Orthodox
It might have been
currently.
7th. Yeah, it's one of the.
Yeah,
It's
Greek
either of those
Orthodox
two days.
currently celebrate it on Jan 7th, but regardless, yeah, you have that
But yeah, no, I
similarity.
get what you're saying. So yeah, we'll see how it plays out.
The connection I was drawing there, though, is that there's handoff of the old world republic and Christianity to this new Aquarian age, information age, religion and society, government. It seems like it's being done. It has to be like handed off from the old world. So we had the Jesuits were basically. I don't know if I got to get this in earlier, but Fauci and Trump both went to Jesuit schools, and that's essentially where they make initial contact, and then and Fauci talks about it all the time, his Jesuit training, and of course one of the original founders of the Illuminati, along with so Adam Weishaupt was a Jesuit as well, and of course with the Rothschilds and Jacob Frank, but started in 1776, same year that they signed the Declaration of Independence.
But a lot of shit happened in 1776. Not even in just America, but in France, England, Germany. You had the Bavarian Order over there in Germany. You mentioned Weishaupt. So
yep, Bavarian Illuminati.
It was a global movement. It was an international movement of changing the paradigm, and as a result, the death of the Holy Roman Empire ensued early in the 19th century. Never saw again. Common law, actually, the Napoleonic Codex became the common law that is in Europe right now. So those movements are still that age is still right now. We're still in that age.
But here's what I don't get, fellas. When the founding fathers, like you were saying, they were not big fans of democracy, I think, either, because their democracy was representative, and they also were supposed to be of the mindset that the people who could participate in democracy had to be of a certain intellectual and philosophical level.
That's how Athens was too.
Yeah,
Athens didn't let some random dude on the street vote.
So here's what I don't understand though. Why not emphasize the same thing? Instead, it seems, at least the culture today, is very low. Even among the elites, it does not seem like they are emphasizing the need to improve oneself, to have some kind of a alchemical inner transformation. Instead, it just seems to be, we're just going to get these fancy gadgets and gizmos and put everybody in them. This is what, and I know we talked about this before, but I'm really trying to figure this out. Are you guys saying, or rather, Drew, are you saying that the elites, in your opinion, understand that, yes, there are all these rituals to be done on oneself, and yes, maybe if we lived back in 1776, there would be maybe not so many people that we could have this emphasis on, hey, like the people in our community, let's all lift them up to this higher level, but now that's not the case anymore. There's way too many people, so we're just going to take like us and maybe our families, and we are going to improve ourselves, while the rest of the people are going to go into like full bugman mode. I don't know. Would that be a fair assessment here? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate, and I think also important to make this distinction, which we kind of ran into in our conversation earlier this week, is that the public-facing elites are not necessarily like the actual ones. They're usually just stupid yes men who are power hungry, that have no morals. So the people really running the show in the background just set them up. They make them commit crimes. They have them run the wars for them. So eventually, when people have had enough and hold this old ruling class accountable, they're going to take out these the public facing people. But to get to your question, basically it's a test. It's all it's Darwinian in a way, and it very much goes along with scripture in the idea of a kind of rapture where but almost in reverse. I think a Thanos snap, which is kind of actually is the same thing as the rapture. If you look at the in the text in the scripture where they describe the rapture, it's one out of every two disappears. So 2 men in the field, one disappears. So it's exactly the Thanos snap, which is what we didn't really get time to cover it today, but the Marvel series named after Marvel Jack Parsons, the character who starts the Avengers in the Marvel universe is based off of Marvel Jack Parsons. It looks
Yeah.
exactly like him, and in the story you can just tell exactly who it is. Okay, he's the savant guy who's coming up with everything. But actually, in the deeper comics, not necessarily in the movie universe, he literally is a comic that came out in, I believe, 2016, where it reveals that Iron Man's dad, who is this guy I'm talking about, Howard Stark, he is a Satanist and has promised the devil his son soul in return for all this knowledge, which he used to basically, save the universe from Thanos. But yeah, he literally, and of course, Parsons literally called himself the Antichrist and all that shit. So, and was trying to create a moon child, aka a moon. What's a moon child? There's the Christ sun child, with all the solar symbology. Then you have a moon child, which would be the opposite.
Wow.
But yeah, no, that's ultimately it. It is it's a test. And here's the other real interesting thing that I think we might have had a question that was kind of around this, but it's like, and it goes along with the astrology cycle stuff. Is like, we're kind of obsessed with this idea of like a narrative, and like the people that seem to be implementing what's going on are 100% evil and blah blah blah, and a lot of them are, but there's also an inevitability to these types of things. Like, as these cycles go on, and eventually, we can see how fast technology has advanced just in our own lifetimes, and
Right.
In certain areas. But then, of course, there's all the advances we have gotten have been leaked out through DARPA, and have basically been DARPA projects they've just let go out. So like SHA-256 encryption, which Bitcoin's built on, that was one. LifeLog, which became Facebook, that was a DARPA
the
project.
internet in general was a military
DARPAnet,
project.
yeah.
Exactly. So,
Lev, I do gotta get going. I'm 5 minutes so late.
all right.
I
Before we get going,
I really do want to have this again sometime.
oh, we are definitely going to do this
is
again.
One of those topics that you can do a 6-hour show on.
All right, Neil, before you get going, though, 2 super chats real quick. From Tio, donated $10. Is the moon landing Christian? Does it help or hurt Christian ontology? I don't know if you'll have time to answer that. I don't know, whatever thought you have there. And then the second one from Tio, I really appreciate it, Tio. For whoever will save his life will lose it, but whoever will lose his life for my sake, the name shall save it. So, I don't know, any parting thoughts, and then you will be... you will be free.
I think Jesus dies during a full moon, so you can be like, well, there's a link between Jesus and the moon, and I don't know, maybe you can just go with. If I was a Christian, I just would say, who cares? I went to the moon, so what? We see the moon; it's there. What's the big deal? What was the second question again?
It was not a question. It was more of just a statement. For whosoever will save his life will lose it, but whosoever will lose his life for my sake, the name shall save it.
Well, yeah, that's very Christian for them to say.
There we go.
Hey,
all right.
Drew, it was nice meeting you, and Lev, it's great as always. We'll do this again. I'll keep in touch. We'll do this again soon.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
This is a lot of fun. All right. Neil, you go. But before you go, Drew, I just want to say, listen, everybody. These are the kind of things that Break the Rules does. We bring people together who otherwise would have never had a chance to be together in the same space. And this is the second time, Drew, that you're here. The first time you were here was with my friend Vladislav Davidson, who is a fellow of the Atlantic Council and writes for Foreign Policy magazine. And so, like, these are the kind of combinations that I don't think I personally have seen anywhere else done on the internet. And so when you're talking about all of this being a human test in a way, I think that what I'm trying to build here feels like something that I have to do. Do you know what I mean? Like, it feels like now is the right time to start bringing a lot of these people together, a lot of these minds, and having all the synapses start connecting. So I know, Drew, if you have any thoughts on where exactly all of this, let's say with Break the Rules, may be leading to, and any parting thoughts, and letting everybody know where to find you, and about American Apocalypse. Oh, and lastly, everybody here, if you guys are enjoying this, be sure to become a patron. patreon.com/breaktherules, you are going to get very beautiful magnets created by my father, Alexander Polyakov. Here are the magnets. Look at them. Look at these beauties. And you guys are going to get them if you become a $20 tier member. And if you become a $50 tier member, you are going to get a custom magnet, whatever design you want to. There's also MP3s of the episodes after they come out. There's also Discord privileges and other good things. But anyway, I've talked a mouthful. Drew, you are on.
Awesome. Yeah, no, great conversation, and yeah, appreciate you having me on. I think there'll be some really good clips from this one. I feel like we really got some really high level shit. I think the progression was pretty good. It stayed on track. So, and got to complete a lot of ideas that usually are very hard to, kind of explain the whole spectrum of them. So, so yeah, no, it's been a great time. Obviously, I'm on Twitter at Drutang Reborn, DRUTANG REBORN. And yeah, my book, American Apocalypse F's, I'm actually going to drop the pre-order link to that tonight. I'm going to be releasing a thread that is going to go into basically everything we just talked about in a little more in-depth detail. It's basically the conclusion to my Eclipse X thread I made after Elon launched his little Eclipse rocket. Yeah, I think that's about it.
Excellent. Well, guys, thank you so much for watching, and a shout out to all the people on Twitter Spaces. If you are still on Twitter Spaces, be sure to go into the YouTube link above in the Jumbotron, click that, make sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. The bell is an extremely important thing. Don't neg on that bell, because we are going to be having a lot of great episodes coming up on Break the Rules. Once again, a big thank you to Neil, Gnostic Informant, and of course, Drew. And we will